I studied quantity surveying, so that's pretty much my background. I have a degree in it, and I worked in the field.
Behind like the mirror in the bathroom, I put a TV, like connected to the sky. All I'm thinking, I've done the best. No one can chat to me. I've done the best thing ever. When I got the agent feedback, they cussed me out.
I aligned myself with, my two business partners who have a strong track record in building.
By the way, for landowners, we love you. We want to work with you, but you're insane at the moment. Welcome back to another episode of the Property by Kazzy podcast with myself, Kaz, and a special guest every week. This week, super special because we're talking, I can't even get a grips of the number of like how many figures we're going to be talking about. It's Mr. Rowan from Featherstone Homes. How you doing?
I'm good, thank you, Kaz. Thank you for having me on today.
It's good to see you. It's always the people with the largest GDVs that start to talk like, yeah, I'm good, man. It's all right.
Every time I see you, it's nothing but love and so forth. So
Come
good
on,
to
man.
see you, man. As always.
Genuinely, obviously. So I think, obviously, when I spoke to my PA and I said, look, get some numbers from Rowan. I looked at the numbers and I said, eesh, I don't know if we can afford this guest, man. But yeah, you said 260 units?
Yeah, since we started the company, our first scheme was 5 units in Catford.
Mm-hmm.
And since then we've either developed or in the process of developing 260 units.
And I think because of the area you develop in, like a lot of people we speak to are developing, outside of London, but you're a proper London developer. A lot of your schemes, zone 2 and 3, but high value areas. So I think your total GDV in terms of once you finish current schemes,
circa 135 million.
135 million there. There's some serious numbers. So it's time to pay attention today.
Yeah.
So your background before getting into property as a developer, where did you start?
It's funny because as a child, it's like I've always said I want to be a property developer. I have an aunt who
You didn't want to be a rapper?
Nah. Rapping wasn't main like that growing up. So I've always said I wanted to be a property developer, and like going through school and so forth. One of my strongest subjects is maths. So when I left school, I was going to university and I was like, what do you want to do? Like your parents like, you got to go uni. And I was like, well, I just want to know what I've got to do. So when I looked into it, I said, I want to get into property. So I said, let me study a course that can help me get into it. So I studied quantity surveying at Kingston University. And when I initially started, I was actually going to do building surveying. But when I asked the lecturer at the time, what do you need in order to become quantity surveyor? He's like, if you're good with people skills, you're good with maths, you should study quantity surveying. I said, well, I'm good with people, I'm good with numbers, so let's look at it. So I studied quantity surveying, so that's pretty much my background. I have a degree in it, and I worked in the field. And I worked for a commercial developer at first, but I always knew residential was my thing, what I wanted to do. So then I transitioned to residential, and literally the rest has been history.
I think before we get into like your kind of like your work history and background, I think one thing that you mentioned there that's really important is actually asking questions. So identifying people that know more than you and asking them questions. Too many people just are so shy or so like, I know everything. Either the opposite, either I know everything or I know nothing and don't want to go out there and ask the questions. But that was actually, the catalyst to you going on the right track effectively.
No, I needed to, because when in your mind you have a picture of where you want to be, and it's what's the best route to get me there. And to be honest, at the time it's like, I could do developing, I don't need to work for no one, but working for someone and learning was the best experience I had. I can't even put a monetary value on what I learned. And I looked at things saying, when it's me, I'll do this differently. Or that's good, I'll replicate that. So, like you're saying, learning, you can't beat learning.
Because I think a lot of people, particularly when people say, I'm at this age, how do I get into property development? And, we were just speaking to one of our other guests, and I think particularly now, everybody wants instant gratification. Like, I want it now. I've got to be the boss now, the property developer now. But I think it's important that you mention how, how instrumental working for somebody else, learning their cost while getting paid.
Yeah.
If you make mistakes, it's somebody else's mistake.
Yeah. And to be honest with you, you're saying, probably been into property 14, 15 years. So it's now you're seeing the benefit of your hard work. But, the previous 10 years before that was just nothing but constant grinding, looking at opportunities, deals falling through. But you're right, that instant gratification is not going to happen.
So how long did you actually work as a quantity surveyor for?
I worked for about 3.5 years.
Mm-hmm.
So with the last place I worked before I set up the company, I worked there for 2 years. And I said to myself when I took this job, I had two offers on the table. I had a very well-known developer who offered me, APC route, and I had a small bespoke developer, and I chose to go down to the small bespoke developer route because I thought I'd just learn more, a bit more exposure, and I did effectively. So I worked there for 2 years, but I said to myself, when I leave, I'm not leaving to go to another company. I'm leaving to start my own company. So that's even just that speaking it, and it happened, it transpired that way.
And I think that's something that I think is a common denominator amongst people that do well, in that they make really conscious decisions in what do I need and what am I going to get out of something. I remember speaking to Alex from AA Drafting, said the same thing. He took a role that was less paid, smaller company, less security, but it offered him the opportunity to work on a plethora of projects as opposed to just, okay, design this, this bathroom, design this, and not really get involved in, the detail that's going to aid your journey.
And I think you hit the nail on the head, because everyone looks at the pound, but I think sometimes the experience long term will take you further than the pound they're offering you right now. So, yeah, you definitely right. The experience, you talk from it is good.
Yeah, obviously it works different for different people. Like I'm like almost the opposite. Me, I'm like a doer. But I sometimes I feel like I think we always think the grass is always greener, but a lot of the times I think what. For me to propel my journey, I would love to have had that, theoretical experience that you've got to feel more confident in certain rooms, in certain scenarios, appraising certain deals.
But the funniest thing, even though I'm a qualified quantity surveyor, I'm not chartered, I didn't actually really enjoy it. It's not something I would say to you I enjoy doing, but I realised I needed to do it to have a better understanding. So right now, I like to spend more time on site, because construction, believe it or not, is not my strongest forte. So for me, sometimes going to site, I understand numbers, I understand this plus that equals that, but I want to kind of learn more of the structural element, the building element process, which is really important also.
So then, fast forward, you've, had obviously your work experience, you've told yourself, I want to set up my own company, and you decided to set up Featherstone Homes.
Yeah.
What was the first project that you embarked on with Featherstone Homes?
5 houses in Catford.
But that's a big project, like in terms of where a lot of people start with their first development. 5 new build houses, right?
5 new build houses, but also what was very fundamental for the progress for myself is I aligned myself with, my 2 business partners who have a strong track record in building. So their expertise wasn't necessarily mine expertise, but I could leverage off that in order to move forward. So, one was an ex-construction director at a very well-known development company. The other one was an ex-commercial manager and was running the department. So when we was looking at funding and optimizing it was quite easier for us to scale because it's a natural progression, because based on what they've previously done, this was the smallest site to them. They've done schemes of 300 units and so forth, which I was a junior surveyor on. So looking where we want to go and looking what we've done in comparison.
And when you were going to these people with all this experience and you're saying, look, this is what we want to do, this is what we want to set up, did you have established relationships with people? Like what were you telling them that you bring to the table for them to,
I was learning on the spot. So a lot of it was literally knocking on doors. No, it doesn't make sense. Knocking on doors, no. And it's just like sometimes that discouragement. But I always knew a no is a no now, but it ain't a no all the time. It's not the role for the rest of our life. So I met with a broker. So I sat down and I basically had to structure like the team sheet, like your squad. I said, this is what we do. This is our strength.
This is our starting lineup.
This is our starting lineup.
The bench might be thin, but this is the starting lineup.
These are the boys that we mean business. So when he looked at that and he looked at the experience of the team, he actually said, you know what, it makes sense for us to go sit down and speak to a few lenders for them to get comfortable, know who you are, because sometimes just looking at something on paper may not make sense. So when we done that, the first thing they looked at us and said, yeah, we will lend you the money. Just find the scheme. These are parameters. And that's literally when I just went hunting and just kept on just looking, spoke to the right agents and done the appraisal and it financially worked.
I think for people that are hearing that and maybe thinking, okay, I don't necessarily want to go and build those 5 flats, or 5 houses, but it works on a more local level as well, that if you don't have the skill set, but you can leverage off your architect, your structural engineer, your building company. You can use all of these people to allow you to get the lending. So you might have a new build scheme or a conversion scheme, and it could be quite small, and they still wouldn't lend to you. But if you say, okay, these are the builders that I've got on board, this is my architect, then you can leverage off their qualification and expertise.
See, I'm going to say something that you might say is quite controversial. I think in developing, there's three aspects of developing. There's finance, there's the construction knowledge, and then there's the sites. If you have 2 out of 3 of those expertise, whether it's your JV or so forth, you can do the other one. So me personally, finding the sites is somewhat the easy part. You establish, you got relationships. Building it is the easy part, so it's the financing part. As long as you got 2 out of 3 of those, I think you're able to do development. I don't know what your thoughts are.
I think it's all about like making something happen, working out where your shortfalls are, or your shortcomings, and then bridging that gap. So for a lot of people, it's arguable where the hardest part is. I remember speaking to Anthony Laville, and he said something that was very poignant in that the hard part isn't getting the money, it's getting to the point where you need it. Because a lot of people think, there's loads of money out there. And if I come, and I guess this would be the other argument, that if I come to you and I say, you know what, Rowan, I've got this amazing deal. You're going to make this amount of money. You're going to do this, and this. And like I said, and I've got the site, but you don't have the money. You're going to get people almost biting your hand off to say, look, let me get involved, subject to the offering being right. But I think you're right in that you need pieces to the puzzle to make people say, okay, all I've got to do is bring one more thing and we're ready to go.
And I think like it's a trial and error. Like it's route, we find it much easier now. We've been offered sites, weekly basis, even in regards to funding, because it's been tried and tested. When you first started, it's like you're picking up the phone to agents like, sorry, who are you? You got experience, but have you delivered any sites? So, but now you've got that expertise behind you and so forth. The conversations get a little bit easier, for sure, a little bit easier.
Definitely. I think it's anything. It's, it's credibility effectively. So that can be from experience, from what people can see that you've done or are currently doing. And it works on it works as simply as even buying a buy-to-let property. If you've put an offer in before, you've gone ahead with that purchase, you've now built credibility with that agent. I think it works the same way at a larger scale. And so there is a transferable skill set.
You're right, because also it's like once the agent knows you can deliver, and there's next door about, and knows you in the market, or she knows you in the market, and also having a good team, because like your lawyers and so forth. I've had lawyers that it's like they want to break it, or it's like they're not have a proactive, let's get it done. There's always problems, but let's overcome them. How can we do it? So having a good lawyer, who works on your team and day and night can push things forward is really important as well.
I was gonna put this thing together because I was talking to one of the team as well, and we were just talking about all the people that we work with, and we were like, you're right. It's funny the analogy that you use, because it really is. There's like a starting 11. So let's say you're the keeper that can see everything. At the end of the day, you've got to protect everything, but then defending you've now got your lawyer, you've got, whether it's your architect, structural engineer, you then got the people up top that are going to pitch the deals for you, say your sources, your sellers, you've got the people in the middle that could be a mentor, and it's a whole collective team that we're going to allow you to win collectively.
And what I really like about my setup in particular is that we all run different parts of the company. So it's like I don't necessarily need to go to site on a daily basis, but I get videos, and I can see it's progressing. But me personally, I'm responsible for buying all the sites, all the financing, all the structuring, and I do all the specifications. So I'll sit down with the agent who we appoint and say, okay, this is what we envision coming to the market. What do you think of the visuals, concepts, the buyers, and looking at the demographics and so forth. So that's the part I enjoy. But the necessary day-to-day on site, I don't really go to site on a daily basis at all.
To do what you have to focus on what you enjoy and what you're good at. So this first scheme in Catford, let's talk about that. So you saw the scheme, you thought, okay, it's viable. How long did it take from seeing it to get an offer put forward? And what was the steps? Did you put an offer forward, then do an appraisal, do your appraisal? Where were you?
Me personally, I always think, if I put an offer forward, it have to be hand on heart. This is my offer, and I know when I can close this deal at this number. I've got the financing and structure in place. So with agents, you never really want to come across as you're playing around, or you say something you can't commit to, because it just be on to the next. So we probably appraise the scheme within a week. I look at the scheme, I look at the numbers. I do reverse engineering. I look at the GDV first.
I'm exactly the same. I feel like deal appraisal is the most substantial skill in property.
Yeah.
And I don't understand how you can do it without working it backwards.
Yeah, that's exactly that. So sometimes you look at it, it's tight, and you say to your business, "Oh, can we value engineer the build cost?" And then we say, "Okay, this is in a great market. This is what you get. This is in a sensible market, and this is you got to sell it straight away and just see
This
how
is
it
your
looks."
fire sale, yeah.
Exactly,
So
the fire saw, as you
So
call
I'm
it.
like, I've got 3 parameters that I use for stress testing. What if the build cost changes by X amount? What if the sell cost changes by X amount? And what if the build takes X amount longer, which affects the finance costs?
Yeah, it all rolls up. But it's funny because on this particular deal, I remember that it was our first scheme, and when they was looking at the comps, the actual the bank valuation surveyor said, "Oh, he believes you're only going to get 550,000 per unit," and I was like, "No, minimum you're going to get is 575," and it was like he was like, "No, show me your specification." We had nothing to show. So it was like, okay, we accepted it on those parameters, but then when we finished building it, I believe we sold them for 575 to 600. You know, very so. Sometimes with the funding, I always work it back, look at the build cost, and highlight every risk item. Every site, no matter what site it is, has risk item. As long as you've allocated it accordingly, we may say, okay, this risk item, it may not come to fruition, but if it does, you know, we've allocated it, and if it doesn't, there's an extra saving, that extra profit into the deal. So
off the back end to see
Yeah.
you know, profits go up. But I think it's always better to be conservative, not overly to the point that you don't get deals done.
I'm a quantity surveyor by trade, so I'm super conservative. I've had banks tell me your numbers are super conservative.
No, we've looked at schemes and I've looked at them and I've laughed and I've said, that's insane. But,
Do you know what I'm trying to-
but I'll even want to lock you in on a deal and say, you know what? I'll agree your numbers, but let me have the override.
Because I always think to myself, if you can make it work on the worst case scenario basis, everything else is, you know, is a plus. And I always say to myself, I'd rather underestimate and then on the profit, you know, more than do it the other way
Yeah,
around.
of course.
So it's just managing expectations and so forth.
Cool. So completed Catford's profitable scheme, worked for you. I've come down to a number of your sites. If you want to check out any of Rowan's developments, actually, I'm going to put the link just here, the space here. Going to have to check with the video guys, but I'm sure they can put it right here for us. It will be the Bermondsey place. That was how many units?
Bermondsey one that you came to was 19
And then
units.
so 19. We saw some befores afterwards. Going to make sure we go and see that. And you can check that out just to see. Actually, I think it's always good to see. You know, when you see somebody talking, you're like, you know what? There's a lot of talking. Let's see some action. So you can go and see that. So you went on to doing some larger schemes, 19 units. Then round the corner.
It's our biggest scheme to date under the Featherstone Home banner, which is 61 units and 15,000 square foot commercial. And that's the largest schemes we've done in the banner, which is, you know, really, really good. But it's funny because our first scheme was 5 units and our second scheme was 20 units in Leytonstone. And it's like, that was a timber frame building, and that was in between the middle of Grenfell. So literally, because I promise you, when, you know, that happened, it literally, the site was shut down, building control shut everything down, changed regulations and so forth. So we literally was on site, standstill, didn't know what to do. And sometimes when you've got that interest racking up and so forth, it's kind of like you're thinking sleepless nights.
Because it's a daily, like when you're playing at that level, your interest is, you know, can be thousands of pounds a day. So every day you're thinking, if the site's closed down, people that have sites closed down because of archaeological surveys.
Pre-commencement, you already know.
And that's the funny thing is, like, we always have these conversations because, like, Rowan will be on to me, like, Hazzy, man, like, come and do a big scheme. Like, come and do
that's
this with
next
me.
to you, though.
No, I know. So obviously, you know what I mean? We might let them get a little teaser of what we're up to. But
It's coming.
so I'll be like, come and do a big scheme. And I'm like, but for me, and again, this is a conversation I wanted to have with you. When I look at these schemes, and I'm like, okay, I'm fine, like, do up to like these 10 unit or 9 to 10 unit schemes. So no Section 106, no affordable housing. In the areas that I operate in, the pre-commencement, which is effectively what you have to do prior to starting any of the works, tend to be pretty straightforward or non-existent in some places. You get the plan and you can start. And I think my issue is sometimes you look and you'll see like 2.5, 3 pages of pre-commencement conditions that you've got to sign off. So unless you've got that level of expertise, I'm like, that's a lot of work and it's a lot of expense. So that's why I was always like, I don't want to go to 20 units. I want to go straight to 40 to 60 so that there's enough meat on the bone to
Yeah.
pay the right people to
Yeah.
deliver in those areas.
And it's funny because every council has different pre-commencements. Like one of our sites at Linton Road, we had to do a bat survey to see if there's bats on site, and if it proved there was, then we had to wait for that season to finish.
12 months
So
to do like the sound reading beginning. No, I've
so
seen it.
You're telling me I cannot build for 12 months because there's bats. So, but I always look at it, and then we allocate it, whether it's the structural engineer, which is the soil investigation, or whether it's the architect, and allocate a time to it. So soil investigations typically would say 3 months. So whenever we buy a site, my typical process is to exchange in 4 to 6 weeks. Once I've exchanged and financially locked into the deal, I would offer a completion of 3 months thereafter. But once I'm locked in, I'll start doing my soil investigations, start instructing architects, engineers, and so forth. So that interest-free period, I call it, is literally you're using it wisely. And then I'll have about 3 to 4 months in the facility in order to discharge all the conditions. Because one thing about conditions is that once you've applied, you've done your pre-commencements, you still got to apply to the council. That takes 8 to 10 weeks for them to discharge it, to say, okay,
We've seen them. We've seen, okay, this is what you're saying. We're going to use it to agree everything that's basically been outlined.
We've had issues with some councils. Let's just say coming to site and say, pull the handbrake up and so forth. This has not been cleared and so forth. But it's a part and parcel of the game.
But again, it's like, I guess it's that pay to play and the level of risk that you're willing to take, because the thing is, like, you can build up a sizable 7-figure cash pot and you could lose it all in one deal if you go large. It really just depends on attitudes towards risk. I think if you are looking to grow your business, are looking to expand, you always have to consider what is your personal risk appetite and how can you mitigate that risk if you are going to go bigger. So whether it means partnering with somebody that knows more, whether that means, and I think in this market, one question I get asked is, but is it the right time? And the reality is that the market might not be as strong as it once was, but it means you can be a lot more creative in offers. So that thing of, having a delayed completion on smaller schemes, having, a key exchange or a key undertaking.
But you're right. When I get asked at that time, should I buy a property? Is it the right time? And to be honest with you, nothing's ever the right time. I've never done something and said it's the right time, I'm going to do it. But opportunities presents itself and you just have to just take it and just make it work and so forth. So, that right timing scenario is never going to be the right time. And I've had friends say, do you think I should buy a property? It's not the right time. 5 years later, they was like, if I bought that property, it's going to buy X amount. So you just have to make it work.
I think one of the best examples I saw in terms of the right time is like when people were talking about if they bought properties in like the beginning of COVID. So say, for example, you use like a £500,000 house. And at that point in time, like 2020, sort of up to 2021, prices were super inflated. People were paying a slight premium. So maybe you were paying like 50k more than you should have. So you bought it for 500,000. But that person bought for 500,000, 50k deposit for argument's sake at 10%, but then they locked in on a 2% interest rate for 5 years. So they're paying £1,800 a month, for example. The person who bought 2023, they maybe bought it for 450. So 45k deposit, in terms they save £5,000 in their deposit amount. Yeah. But then because they're on a 5.5% rate, they're paying £3,000 a month. So it's like, it's always swings and roundabouts. Yeah, you save 50,000, but only a £5,000 on your deposit. Also, you're now £1,000, £2,000 worse off every month. So there's never going to be a perfect time. But I think the most important thing is you have to pay the price based on the condition of the market. Because the worst case would be to overpay in a market that's not, as bullish.
And I've seen you talk about in this various times, that right timing and so forth. But I always think with property is that the long-term game, you're always going to win, in my personal opinion. And when you look at it historics, I know everyone says a recession comes in every how many years, but even if you look at the last recession and the recession before that and look at property prices in between, is that, you might have a dip and so forth, but if it is a long-term game, you'll be fine. It's when you try to do the quick flips, which you may get caught out, which you were speaking about previously and so forth. But the long-term game, if you're saying, I'm going to hold this asset to 5-10 years, generally speaking, in the areas that you're in, they're good areas, every, amenities are there and so forth, transport's great, and it's high yielding areas. When you look at, I always say, before you spend on something, look at the area, how it's, the last 10 years, how property price has gone, and that will tell you an indication if you think, okay, this is an area I want to step into.
I think also in a difficult market, having a diverse exit. So you look at it and say, okay, I want to flip these properties, and if I flip them, I'm going to make, whether it's £100,000 or £1,000,000, that's what my goal is to make. But worst case scenario, if the market speaks and it says I'm going to refinance them, and this is how they're going to work in a refinance. And even if you're going to refinance them, there's always ways to get creative. So say, for example, you said the yield isn't what you wanted it to be. The Airbnb market is booming, so maybe that would work.
Yeah. I think we've looked at, every time we do an appraisal, we do look at the exit strategies and so forth. But I think something COVID has taught me is that there's some things you just can't predict for. If we used to sit down 5 years ago and say there's going to be COVID, and so we was literally, sites was shut down and couldn't have any deliveries, couldn't build, couldn't sell. We just literally sat down thinking, what can we do right now? Interest is racking up, and so it's just like there's some things you just can't predict. But you're right, when you look at different exit strategies, you look at refinancing it, selling. There's various different ways, but from the offset, sometimes those exit strategies never come to fruition.
Yeah, and I think the other thing to consider also is when you're talking about partnerships. That's where partnerships become more important in terms of whether it's investors or actual like JV partners, because if exit strategies can change, you have to have long-term aligned goals
100%.
to allow there to be that flexibility of change of exit.
And it's just like, even like working with like-minded individuals, like me and you were talking, knock heads together, say, oh, Kaz, I'm thinking about this, what do you think? You'd be like, structure it that way. And I think, well, I didn't think of it that way. So sometimes even it's like speaking to people within the industry and saying, well, this is the issue I've got. And then you give me a solution, which somewhat I was blindsided. I didn't actually see it there, but just listening to it, you said, oh, you've done it. So it's good. But collaborations, I think, is the way forward. Yeah, in order to scale, 100% the collaboration.
That's one of the reasons why I started the PBK community, is because I saw that, look, I can't offer everybody mentorship and sit down with all of these different people and offer them as the value I wanted. But by building a community of people that are proactively investing in property, people are answering each other's questions, we're all learning from each other. Nobody's going to know the answer to everything, and nobody knows nothing. So it's like a really good place of where people learn together collectively and actually get deals done and make money. So that's why we set that up. You know what I think is funny about you? I was thinking about it the other day, that like you do all these big deals, but then sometimes when you told me like you'll come and give me your comps for the smaller stuff, because you went like backwards, you went straight head first. Yeah. When you look at like, okay, I'm just going to do something personally on the side outside, you're like, it's completely different how you appraise, because you appraise it like the big deal.
Yeah, and sometimes that's the mindset. So it's funny because when we was talking about, there's another thing that happens, that our last scheme we bought, build costs with the war went through the roof. So let's say it was £1,200 a ton. It went up to 1,700. So on our build costs, you're talking about an excess of 300,000 cost overrun before you even put a spade in the ground. So we have to sit down with our consultants and like, this is the case. What can we do in order to bring it in line with our build costs? Because you're right, there's only so many things you can control, and the ones you can't, you really need to draw in expertise. So for me, I was saying this the other day, the deal that's giving me the most problem, it's the smallest deal I've ever done today. It's funny, the biggest deal I've done today just flew through. The smallest deal I've done today, and remember I was saying to you guys, what the hell going on? It took me the most time to get that deal through. So I always think to myself, it's like, not go big or go home, because sometimes you got to be sensible in what you do. But I got a theory in life called pounds per stress. So in order for it to financially make sense to give me the stress, I'll take it. If it doesn't make financial sense and I'm going to get stressed with it, it doesn't make any sense for me. I'd say thanks, no thanks. So now we're appraising sites, and I think build costs are high, interest rates are high, so land prices have to come down.
Can I ask you, because that's it. I mean, land price coming down is just, by the way, for landowners, we love you, we want to work with you, but you're insane at the moment. Like, I'm seeing stuff and I'm like, somebody sent me something the other day, and I was just like, it's not even worth half that. But I guess obviously it comes from market correction.
But what I realize is that I always say when I speak to agents, it's not worth this amount. For me, I'm willing to pay this amount, because I've missed out on schemes where 6 months later they sold it for less than what I was willing to buy, because I just didn't keep the relationship going. So I always say, and I'll send them the appraisal. I'll say, look at my appraisal and tell me the numbers that you think I've gone wrong, to see if we can get to the numbers it needs to be. But always give them an offer and say, this is where I'm at with it. Give me a call if he or she's willing to do it, because prices today, I've bought sites that I've been appraising for a year. Then they phone me and say, okay, this is the strike price, can you do it? And I'm like, okay, let's do the deal. So always, keeping that relationship and just speaking to them and just being an open book. Here's my proposal. This way it sits at, and just see if can get the deal done. But yeah, you're saying land prices right now it's not making sense.
It's tough. Obviously, build costs have gone up. I feel like build costs are stabilizing slightly. What do you find? I mean, it's very top level and it depends, but like sort of price per sort of square meter per square foot, depending on what you work in.
Before price increases, we remember we build in house, so we don't use a main contractor, right? We was comfortably 190, standard build, traditional one lift. Now, a same scheme of that nature, you're talking minimum 265 a square foot.
Yeah.
Which you can see is a big difference when you're thinking 10, 20,000 square foot that you're building. So it's definitely, a change. And also, labor's gone up. So, materials have gone up. But also, we was paying, we say, a site manager, you might £190 a day. Now you're talking £300. It's gone up dramatically. So that also has a huge effect on your profits and, ensuring you keep your profit margins there.
And I think competition as well, in terms of the end product. I remember I used to be the design guy, so doing these really nice bathrooms.
I love your bathroom.
But what it is like the competition has also got like the Berkeley homes, all of the big homes used to be nice but very vanilla.
Yeah.
Whereas now you're seeing a lot more. You're seeing the niches, you're seeing the lights, you're seeing the feature walls, and I'm saying, okay, so competition wise, even though these build costs have gone up, you can't afford to scrimp on end products because there's a lot of competition out there.
Your bathrooms, I must say, and your kitchens at gold and so forth. It's hard because I will sit down and I think it's beautiful, I like it. Then I think, I don't believe it's Marmite, but I don't think it's neutral. So sometimes I look at something and say, it's lovely, but would I put it in the development to have like a neutral type? Someone comes in and it's like, yeah, it's nice, but is it too specific? But the colorings and so forth, I've seen in some of your stuff. If you see it in my development, I ain't paying you for it. Just
but I learned. I'm telling you. See, I'll give you an example. Yeah, the first project I ever did, tiny 1 to 2 bedroom conversion. But I'm 22. I want to say 23. So I'm I've probably just come back from Dubai. I'm gassed. I'm I want to do it this standard. Behind the mirror in the bathroom, I put a TV. Connected to the sky. All I'm thinking, I've done the best. No one can chat to me. I've done the best thing ever. When I got the agent feedback, they cussed me out, said, you wasted money, we would have offered it, but you want too much for it because you put the TV in the bathroom. And you're right, you can't over personalize things. But I always try and have a design theme where I'm okay, I feel like this is the kind of person that's gonna buy here.
Do you remember you had a place in Catford?
Yeah.
That you bought as a 1-bedroom flat. Yeah. And you had a blue kitchen with gold handles and hinges. I think that was so nice, and I think it's unique and so forth. But then when I looked at it, I was thinking, would I do this for 40 units rolled out?
Yeah, nah, I don't think. Again, so it's you've got to understand what you're doing and purpose. So I wouldn't do that because I could do that because it was a period property. I'm thinking about, okay, it's the brickwork outside, the feeling you get when you see it's a 1900 building. You go in, you're seeing, whether it's the coving, whether it's the alcatraves, and it all kind of works together. Whereas if you're doing, I'm sure I'll find a buyer for that and they'll pay over the odds because they love it. But if you've got to produce 40 of them, are you going to find 40 buyers for that?
And so forth. And also, we was predominantly developing Help to Buy. So, it was mainly, city workers in the city and so forth. They want good transport links. So the area was really important to them. Having a nice house, a nice flat, and made sense. But it's the area, the amenities, which actually drove them to the area. So, yeah, I really like your stuff. So,
pretty sure. Obviously, that's why. Obviously, we're talking about some collaborative ventures.
Yes.
At the moment,
that's coming inspired by Kaz. Those bathrooms there.
At the moment, a lot of stuff's pricey though, so looking to potentially work with a couple
it's funny,
of people.
It's because I keep speaking to family agents. I'm seeing sites that we appraised last year.
Yeah. No, we looked at stuff that were last year they wanted. Well, no, not even last year. Before that, 18 months ago, they were looking at 12 million.
Yeah.
10, 9, and then now it's okay, we're getting to the point where it makes sense, and for the right person, get the right person on board with us, and can do a deal.
No, it definitely is coming for sure.
And I think I'm a firm believer in putting out there, because it's a lot of people think, if I say it, somebody else is gonna take my deal or take this or X, Y, or Z. But you put out there what you're looking for in terms of those conversations.
The reason I'm smiling now is that obviously I was following you on Instagram before I actually met you, and I remember you saying one thing that stuck to me. You said the reason why you're not bothered about certain aspects of it because there's enough money for everyone. So it's like my whole thing is like I have friends that would be like, if this doesn't work for me, so we can have it. And if it ever comes to the stage where we both sort and so forth, we just have a conversation about, or maybe just even JV. But maybe. You're right, there's enough out there for everybody. So it's not like, oh, this is mine. If a deal doesn't work for me, but I know, somebody who wants to, buy something in that type of price range, take it. I'll make the introduction and so if I don't want nothing from it, all the best. If you can make money for it, go for it. So you're right, there's always enough out there. So collaborations for me, I definitely think, is the way forward and so forth.
It's like every time like I've done a deal, and I remember talking to somebody, I was like interviewing them, not like this, maybe when I was doing the Instagram lives and stuff, and I'm asking them, this to do HMOs, and I was like, oh yeah, like what area? And I know what area. I don't want to say. And I was like, do you know how many houses there are? Like you working with people, building those relationships, maybe they might look at a house that you want to look at one day, but they also might introduce you to a builder that's going to work really well for you, a solicitor, an architect, all of these people that can add value. And I think the more you realize, okay, you do a deal on a street and then you realize there's another 300 houses just like that on that street, there's another 500 streets just like that in the area, and then you realize that there's another 100 areas just like that. There's so much money out there to make, and it doesn't take you having to go all over the world. Like, just get on the DLR, go to Canary Wharf and look up. There is unlimited money. Like, it's just your take of, okay, just take a percentage.
Yeah, but also I'll say to you is that, do you remember that feeling doing your first deal?
It was just this is a thing.
Yeah, and it's even the concept of like, I can make this full time, because initially a lot of people start off like, including myself, like part time, kind of dabbling in. You think, okay, you get your first, you think, oh, this is nice, and so if we can make it work, and then just building up momentum.
I think what's funny is like the first deals were like, okay, cool, like kind of like the money that was made from it, I was like, this is like a yearly salary. But as I went on to make more significant sums, the money stopped being so important, because you make the money, but I think the sign of a good developer is that you never have money, because it's being rolled into the next deal.
People don't understand that. Like, when you say to somebody right now, liquidity is not there, your money's gone. So I always like, there's a difference between you spent your money and there's a difference between you've invested your money. So once you say, no, my money's gone over there and stuff, then thinking, what do you mean you've got these events? It's like, having money is costing me money. So having money sitting down and not deployed into a scheme to make more money means that I'm not working and I'm not a good developer. So sometimes it's like, you see something and you're constantly spending, and think, okay, then you see schemes like, I want that, and you've just bought something else. So it's just a juggling that, but no, it's a game. I love it.
It is, but it's literally that. It's like, I feel like sign of a good developer means you don't have that money, because you already have the pipeline of the next deal. And all you're thinking is, you know what, you're even juggling to the point where you're saying, just give me another month and we're ready, because I'm going to exit over here and bring the money over there. But that's exciting. What do you feel like, what's next for you? What do you want to do next?
Like I've been saying to yourself, we need to hit the BTR, build to rent. So literally, we've only completed one development to date, which is predominantly build to rent, which we had a bulk purchase or pull out, and then we just refinanced the whole block. But looking at our rental portfolio and seeing how much rents have increased on each individual unit basis, building a development specifically for rental in the area, having great amenities on site, whether it's gyms, cafes, spaces like this, for me is the way forward.
I think we spoke about it. We said ideally get to the point where you're building very specific types of developments, 100 unit plus, in a close cluster of areas, and then at a certain point in time you can look to say, do you want to exit to a fund? Do you want to keep them in-house?
That's it. When you build it, because like we've had various, operators say, well, when you get to X amount, like you're saying, pension funds will buy it once it's stabilized in the yield. So you know, you're adding value. Yes, you're retaining the value, but you're having a passive income on a monthly basis. Because I always say, it's like, if someone gives you made £1 million tomorrow, you're only going to deploy it into another scheme now anyway, aren't you, really? So having that passive income to know that, you know, your lifestyle choices and so everything's paid for, and to continue to build is the optimum, is what
it's about.
Yeah,
that's good. We appreciate you coming on today.
Anytime.
I know already we've made commitments to do some JVs, some projects.
I want
to
hold you to that. You said it on the camera.
No,
right now.
I'm going to. But the thing is, why outside of just, you know, I think firstly it's personal relationships. We met, you know, different people spoke very highly of Rowan. You know,
and yourself, because I always used to see it at the gym, and I used to say to Ade, Adewale, that when I see him, but every time I see you in the gym, you're just so focused, like just locked in and so forth. Then we went out for a meal, and I just feel like since, you know, I've met you and met other people, everyone's energy is just on the right page. And like Ade's helped me, you know, tremendously, just make an introduction and just off the relationship. So yeah, we're definitely going to do something.
That's it. And the other thing is, obviously, we spoke about having, like I said, having the goals that are aligned, and we said, you know, within the project we'd make sure there was an element of deployment for education, so we could bring people, you know, in the local area to understand exactly what happens, what it took to get to this point. You know, even in terms of, there's a lot of people that want to start but maybe have a different skill set and could start in an apprentice role to understand, so to be involved in the construction, but also then take them aside to also understand the development. There's a few things that we've got coming up, and like even we've got like a separate element called Featherstone Community, where we do community projects within the community. Last month we done a football tournament in Wandsworth. I think we had 112 kids. It was awesome. I know you love football and so forth. We've got another one coming up, I think June 9th. So I definitely you know, we've got the team that we sponsor at Most Wanted.
Oh yeah, I've seen it.
They just got a couple players signed as well. So again, it's all these things of these active working relationships.
I tell you what, sometimes, and like we went to Shed Show Academy and we had a few of the students come to our sites and so forth, because they were struggling with the engineering aspect of it. Sometimes that gives me more fulfillment than actually doing the deals.
No, definitely. There's loads of stuff. Like I always talk about being able to like name buildings after my late grandmother and things like that, you know, it's not the money that came out of those deals. That might have been the most profitable deal, but it's the actual what you were able to do. But what I say is, look, we're gonna come up with an idea. We're gonna come up with some sort of bet. I'm gonna bring my football team that I sponsor. You can bring your boys, and you know what I mean. In the comments, let us know what you want us to put on the line. But we're gonna make sure, because I know Most Wanted Elite, they be, you know what I mean.
What's the age group of the team?
It doesn't matter. They got whatever age group you want to bring. We'll bring quality.
Okay,
yeah,
I'm ready.
Can we lock in? Alright then.
Got you, that's on camera, right?
Yeah, no problem. So I appreciate you coming on board. It's been Rowan from Featherstone Homes. We're going to make sure all of his details, if you want to connect with him, he's doing some amazing things, are going to be in the description of this podcast. If you've enjoyed it, make sure you subscribe. We're going to be back next week with another amazing guest. This has been the Property by Kazzy podcast with myself, Kaz. Peace.